And when they all began in these different regions, they all succeeded because they started getting heard there and then broke out nationally and, of course, internationally. And it meant so much to people around the world and have been such a great beacon around the world for what is great about American culture. Now, I don't know if that cycle is going to continue if we don't allow the fertilization of new music and new sound by letting music be decided by merit and what's exciting and new, and not just who's got a big record label backing them with wads of cash. I know full well that today's musicians have all kinds of exciting new platforms to get their music out, like satellite radio, which is wonderful. I subscribe myself. Of course, the internet, iTunes, and things like YouTube. They have all kinds of different ways to display and disseminate their creative talent. And the broadcasters, of course, use that argument to say, don't worry about it. But the fact remains we need to worry about it, because broadcast radio continues to be the dominant way to break new artists and to get new music heard. The two satellite radio companies, for example, that we hear so much about, and they are fantastic, they've only got about 12 million subscribers, while over 200 million people listen to terrestrial radio on a weekly basis. And we also know for a fact that there's the strongest correlation between airplay and record sales than any other factor. The radio industry knows it, the record industry knows it, the musicians know it. That's why I've been so strong on trying to encourage the Commission to stamp out payola practices in the radio broadcasting industry. I really believe that payola hurts musicians and the radio industry in a free flight who can pay the most and not what sounds the best. It really puts the communities that they are licensed by us to serve and the needs and tastes of that local community. It may be a short-term gain for the station, but in the long run, I think it turns off the listening public. Advertisers end up migrating to other platforms. In the long run, the radio industry itself loses out. And of course, it's inconsistent with one of the pillars of our broadcast media ownership system, localism, which really requires broadcasters to put local interests first. That includes local artists and the local community's own tastes. So for the long-term health of the radio industry and for the music industry and for all of us as listeners and as citizens, it's in all of our interest to fight against it. And this is the way the law has been ever since the FCC was even, before the FCC was even created. The very first act, the Radio Act, 1927, before the Communications Act, Congress has always maintained an unwavering requirement that broadcasters have to announce who gave them valuable consideration to air anything. These federal sponsorship identification rules are an unequivocal legal obligation up and down the chain of production and distribution to disclose all forms of consideration. These rules are based on a long-standing principle that listeners and viewers have a right to know who's trying to persuade them so they can make up their own minds about what they're hearing or seeing. Now, despite many allegations I heard when I first got to the Commission about widespread payola abuses, we never really got specific complaints in. We never really tried to investigate those claims, but we never had the kind of record evidence to back them up until the New York Attorney General, then New York Attorney General, now the Governor of the state of New York, Eliot Spitzer. He did an incredible investigation that brought to light an arsenal of smoking guns involving hundreds of radio stations. He really aggressively pursued the problem the way it needed to be done, and he found vast numbers of potential violations of federal law. And at my urging, the FCC launched an investigation based largely on the documents that we got from the Attorney General's office. Now, our Enforcement Bureau made the decision to focus on the corporate practices of just the four largest radio station groups, Clear Channel and Entercom and CBS and Citadel, to look into these allegations. They figured they'd start with the big ones first. I don't want to comment too much on this ongoing investigation, but I'd like to make just three general points. First, I think that whatever the result of this investigation is not going to be a panacea, but we do need to make sure that we implement meaningful reforms that begin to change corporate practice and behavior. There needs to be a change in radio's corporate culture so that it doesn't encourage or promote the use of major record labels to subsidize the operating costs of the stations or to enhance their revenue. You know, while dishonest employees will continue, perhaps from time to time, to take some money under the table, station owners need to send a really clear message that that kind of practice won't be tolerated and that there are practices in place to prevent it. Second, our job is to enforce the law, and there needs to be effective government oversight. As the old saying goes, I think sunshine is the best disinfectant. I believe the FCC can play a real role in ensuring the industry has sufficient safeguards in place and that we're overseeing them. Third, we need to ensure that independent and local artists get a fair chance at airplay. They need a shot. I've been hearing concerns from independent labels that while they were getting little airplay before the New York and FCC investigations, the backlash made it even harder for them sometimes to get through the door because they couldn't get their promotion people even listen to. We should make sure that our investigation doesn't freeze out fresh, local, or new and independent music. I think that everyone, artists, the industry, and the public, is better off when the best songs, not the highest bidders, get played on the radio. Otherwise, we'll never know how much creative genius gets lost, even from places like right here in Memphis where there's so much wonderful creative music being created right here. We owe it to the American public, we owe it to music lovers, to creative artists, and to everyone to enforce the law fairly, reasonably, and absolutely strictly.